Hi, everybody. Welcome to the ESC onboarding program. My name is Josh, and today I'll be walking you through the second module of 9 total trainings for the ESC customer onboarding. Today we are going to be learning how to enter in a dispatch, as well as set up your dispatch board, create notifications, and how to set up new technicians within ESC. Now, to get started with dispatching, when a customer calls in for service, you have to already have them as a customer, which we learned in our last session. So, what we need to do to start this dispatch is find that customer. And to do that, we're going to go ahead and start at that customer center that we learned from our last training. Now, just like we learned from our customer training, we are going to go ahead and search for our customer using that search box right at the top of that center screen there. So let's go ahead and search for the service address of this customer that we would like to do service for. We'll go ahead and type in our address, and you see that customer does come up. We can go ahead and, as we learned from the customer training, right click on that location and then hit add a dispatch. Now when we do that, you see it will automatically carry you right into the dispatch screen. Now the good part about this is since we did this from the customer center, that location information that we had clicked on all carried over automatically. From here I can see my location address as well as my billing address. Now with dispatching, you'll also see that more information will carry over or automatically pop up, starting with the dispatch number. You'll see here that it automatically assigned a number to this dispatch. This will continue to assign the next number as you create dispatches. As we go through down the list here as well, you'll see that we have the sales sort code also automatically filled out. This was from our customer training on how did you hear about us. In this case, my customer heard about us through Angie's List, and it carried over from that customer entry screen. Now below our sales sort code, you'll see that we have the zone filter. This here is a way to actually list or view your dispatches by a particular zone. By default, it will show the customer's zip code, and you could sort by zip code, or you can enter in your own zone if, say, maybe you wanted to search by county or multiple states. And below our zone field, we now have also the date received, the time received, and the received by. Now what this is going to do is just inform you when you pull up this particular dispatch, who was the person logged into ESC that created this dispatch, and what date and time did they actually fill out this particular dispatch. Now the last bit of information that you see carry over automatically is down in the bottom left hand corner. You see those location notes. These are the location notes that you set up on the customer at the location level, which is something we talked about in our previous customer training. Now let's go over the stuff that we're going to need to fill out for actually creating this dispatch. So if I were to call into you asking for service, there will be some things in here that you would want to fill out. Now of course you don't need to fill out everything here, but the more information we have the better. So the first thing we're going to start off with here is the called in by. So who's the particular person that's actually calling in for service? So in this case, we'll put my name in there and see that I'm the one that actually called this in. The next thing we're going to take a look at is a service request code. Now when we pull the little drop down box here, you'll see that I have some already in here, and you may have some already too based on your industry type. What this is used for is just a generic reason of why this customer is calling in. So in this case, let's say I called in and said that my unit was not powering up. I could put that information in there, and when I hit tab, you'll see that the information for that particular reason why I'm calling in came across already into the dispatch notes. Now what's great about these service request codes is this is something that your technicians will see if you're using the mobile application. And what's great is if we need to create more, we can absolutely create more of these service request codes. Now how we create new service request codes in the ESC is by coming up here to dispatch and then dropping down here to enter service request codes. When we click on that, this will take you right into the entry screen, and you can see the ones that I currently have created. If we needed to create a new one in here, you could go ahead and just hit add new, but as we're looking at it, the only thing that you'll need to fill out is give it a code. This would be like a tasking code, a description of what that problem is, and if you would like, you can even put an estimate of how long you believe this particular task to take. Once you have your service request code in here, you can start adding in additional notes if you see fit. So if we come to the bottom right hand corner here, We can do our same date and timestamp just like the location notes from our customer training. It'll enter in that date that you put this in and who's the person logged into ESC at the time, and you can add in your notes of what you think is actually wrong with this particular unit, or more importantly, what did the customer say? This is where you can be as detailed as you would like, and this is something that will show to your technician if they have the mobile application as well. You will have the option of having these particular notes here go over to your invoices if you want your customers to see them. We'll get into that a little bit later when we get to the sales invoicing training. Now you'll see that there's a few other fields that I haven't gone over yet. Things like the agreement drop-down menu. What this is used for is for your preventative maintenance contracts or any of your service agreements. If this was a dispatch created off of one of those agreements, you would see the agreement number listed here automatically. Same thing with the job field down here, which is something we'll go over in another training as well. If you had created a job and then dispatched off of that job, you'd see the job listed here as well. Now there will also be the invoice field. The invoice field will show you if this particular dispatch has been invoiced or not. If it has been invoiced in ESC, whether in mobile or in the office, you'll see that invoice number listed here. There's also the customer PO field. This is where you could put in any RO numbers, or if you have a customer purchase order number created already, you could go ahead and enter that in here. Now the last field I want to show you before we actually schedule our dispatch is the priority field. You'll see that if I click the drop down box for a priority, I've already created a few of them in here. We've got one as an example called the high priority, and it's actually got a color associated with red. What that's going to do is tell this dispatch that it's a high priority, and when we later schedule this dispatch, it's going to show up on our calendar, or what we call the electronic dispatch board, or EDB, as a red dispatch. We can create new priority in the system. If you remember from our customer training, those blue hyperlinks next to any of the fields we're looking at will take us right into that entry screen. From here, we could add a new priority just by giving it a name and assigning it a color, or edit any existing priorities that we already may have in the system. Once you have as much information about the dispatch filled out as you would like, you could go ahead and schedule this dispatch if you knew exactly who you wanted to go to. But if you didn't know, and we weren't ready to actually schedule this dispatch yet, we could go ahead and save this dispatch. And what will happen is if we come up here to our dispatch board button, the EDB, this will take us right into our calendar. And from here, you can see that we have an unassigned column, and my dispatch is actually assigned there, waiting to be scheduled to a technician. Before we actually schedule the dispatch we just created, what you'll need to do is set up your dispatch board to show your technicians, as well as any other non-tech columns on the left-hand side. Now to do that, the first thing you're going to want to do is actually create your technicians. Now keep in mind, if you're coming from an accounting package, let's say like QuickBooks, we'll go ahead and import over your employee list as technicians as well. But to create a new technician or edit an existing technician within ESC, you come up here to Dispatch and go to Enter Technicians. Now from here, you can see I have some technicians already created. If we needed to edit them, we could, or we can go ahead and create a new technician. When we hit Add New, you'll see that a lot of information will pop up here. We have a bunch of different tabs that you can fill out for this particular technician. The bare minimum that we do need to have a technician on the dispatch board, though, is just this top field up here, a last name, a first name, and a dispatch name, or in this case, what they'll show up on the calendar. So if someone has a nickname, you could put that in the dispatch name. Now, of course, we want you to fill out as much of this field as possible, but it would be really, really important if you paid attention to the schedule and the pay rate. These are things that will actually come in use later in some of our other trainings. Once you've gone through and created all your technicians and you filled out as much of the tabs as you would like, you can go ahead and close out of this. And what we'll need to do now is actually add them to your dispatch board. And to do that, we're going to go back up to that same dispatch drop-down menu and then go to Set up Dispatch Boards. Now when we do this, you'll see that it's going to come up with an entry screen, and you'll see that I have multiple boards. by default you'll just have one called service, but you can create multiple boards or multiple calendars for your company. So let's say you have one for service versus install, or maybe even one for your sales. You could create and make each one of those. Let's go ahead and take a look at my service board. When we open up that service board, you'll see it's a general snapshot of what the dispatch board behind it looks like. On the left hand side, you have all of your what we call non-tech columns, and on the right hand side, you have just your standard technicians that you would like to show on this particular dispatch board. Now, to add a technician to that right hand side of your dispatch board, all you would do is come down to the blank white line here, and that'll actually populate a drop down menu for you to go ahead and pick and choose what column or what technician you would like to appear. On the left hand side, it would work the same way. If I were to choose that white column right there and go from the drop down menu, I'll see a list of my technicians and my non-tech columns. Now, when we refer to non-tech columns, what that's actually meaning is a technician or a column that's not a physical person who will be assigned dispatches. So as an example, our unassigned column, or something that maybe is on order. These would be what's considered a non-tech column. Now at the bottom of the screen, we have a schedule display from field. This will show you a time frame of, in this case, 8 to 5, and how often are your scheduled appointments. Do you do them in maybe a half-hour intervals, 15, or an hour long? This will help out when looking at a different view of the dispatch board that we'll see in just a moment. Once you're done and you have everything set up and all of your technicians added, you can go ahead and hit OK and head back to your dispatch board. Here we'll close out our setup dispatch boards, and now you should be able to see your technicians on the right hand side and all of those non-technicians on the left hand side. Now that we have our technicians added, let's take a moment to look at the different views or options we may have for this calendar or dispatch board. We'll start by changing the view of the dispatch board. Now to do that, up in the very top, there's a few calendar options that you see here, little icons. One of them has just a standard calendar, one with a 7, and one with 31 in it. The standard view, the one we're currently on now, will look just like this. You'll see the date of your oldest dispatch at the top, and all dispatches for that particular date under it until it runs out for that day, and we'll continue to move on to the next. We also have what's called the 7-day view, and when we click on that, you'll see this particular dispatch style here. What's great with this one is if we assign a dispatch, you'll actually be able to see by hour how long those particular dispatch will be covered for that technician. So if you have time slots instead of appointment times, this is a good way to actually see or block off a technician by the hour. Now the last view that you have in the top here is called the 31-day view. And when we click on that, it's just a monthly view that'll show you an overall idea of how full you are within a given month. This view is really good to just get an idea or summary snapshot of how busy you might be, but for the most part, you'll want to stick with the dispatch view or the 7-day view for when you're looking at your actual calendar and scheduling your dispatches. Now that we have our dispatch board set up in the view that we like, let's go ahead and actually schedule it out. To schedule a dispatch, there are 3 different ways of doing that. One way of doing it is from the dispatch board itself. We can actually left click on the dispatch and then drag and drop it over to a particular technician that we might want. And you'll see that I can move this around by time. And once I'm done and I have it set to where I would like, we can go ahead and just drop it there, let go, and this window will pop up. Do you wish to set the status to traveling? In this case, this is used for anyone not doing our ESE mobile application and is still assigning their dispatches to their technicians. In this case, you could hit yes, but if you are using the ESE mobile application, you would want to go ahead and hit no, as that's going to be controlled by your technicians out in the field. Now you'll see that when we hit no, it automatically applied that dispatch over here for the time scheduled and assigned it to that technician. From here, when we're looking at our 7-day view, we can actually adjust our time slots. So if this was going from 8 to 11, we could drag it out, and now you see that that dispatch has it set for my technician for that particular time frame. Now from here, you'll see if I have actually clicked on the dispatch, the information for the dispatch is showing up on the right hand side. I can see the customer, their contact information, and a little bit about that dispatch, including the dispatch number and the priority. Now below that, I can even see the technician that it's assigned to, its current status, and the promise date or the appointment time that we have set for this customer, and any notes. From here, this is actually how I could also schedule this dispatch. I can actually choose the drop down box, and I could pick any one of my technicians, and I can even add notes if I needed to, and hit the save button. When I do that, you'll notice that the dispatch automatically popped back over to the unassigned column where I had it scheduled to. Now the last way to actually schedule a dispatch is by finding that particular dispatch and going into that schedule tab or when we were creating it. Let's take a moment to see how we can actually find the dispatch. We of course have it here on our dispatch board. From here we could actually double click this dispatch and it'll take us right into it. We can even go to it from our customer center as well. You'll remember from our customer training, by clicking on that particular location, that history on the right hand side is now starting to build out. From here I can even click on that dispatch, see a little bit more information about it, or even hit the edit dispatch, which will take me right into it. You can also go to any one of the list views, again if you remember from our customer training, that will show any part of that module to be able to search for any existing records. So if I were to click on my dispatch list, by default, it's showing my last 30 days worth of dispatches. Now when you have a lot of dispatches and a lot of service, this gets hard to sift through. So we have that search box back here as well, where you can search for anything for that particular dispatch, be it the customer, the location address, or even the dispatch number or notes, or even technician. So from here, I can double click on this dispatch, and it takes me right into the schedule tab. Now from this schedule tab, I can choose the drop down box and schedule out my technician, give it a promise time and date. Remember, these are our appointment times, and save it. If we click the general tab while we're on here, this would also be the same process as of you creating the dispatch and you knew exactly who you wanted it to go to. You could just click on that schedule tab and assign it directly to that technician and then hit save. Now when we do that, we can go back to our dispatch board by opening up one of the tabs left open here, or by clicking on the dispatch button up at the top. Now you'll see that we saved it, and it did automatically pop over here to my technician on the dispatch board. Now that we have our dispatch scheduled to our technician, let's go ahead and switch it back over to the dispatch view so you can see how it'll look like there. Now the good part about having ESC Mobile is when we assign this dispatch to our technician, he would have been automatically notified that he received a dispatch, and you'll be able to control how many of these dispatches he can see at a time on his mobile device. He'll get that update, be able to go into his application, and then start working that particular dispatch. Now once the technician actually has that dispatch, he would want to start actually working through the different statuses. So the next step would be, if we right click on it in the office, we can change the status, and from mobile they'll be able to do this as well. We're going to go ahead and set it to traveling, which means the technician is on his way to that job. When we click that particular status code, you'll notice that an icon changes here on that dispatch to a little truck. That's just visually, when looking at the calendar or the dispatch board, for you to know that this particular technician is on his way to this job. The great part about ESC Mobile is when he changes that status code on the application, you'll also see this status update here as well. The next step of the job would be when the technician actually gets there. So if we go ahead and right click on our dispatch again in the office, you'll see that we have the working status code. By clicking on that working status code, you'll see it also, of course, changes that dispatch icon to a little wrench now. So visually you know that this particular technician started working on this job. Now, important thing about this is when it now starts recording your labor, your times, and your cost. So we want to make sure if a technician is using the ESC mobile application that he's accurately going through these status codes and changing them. Same thing in the office, but it's okay. If he happens to forget or makes a mistake, any of these times can always be edited by anyone with the permissions in ESC to do so. Now if we go ahead and right click on our dispatch one more time, you'll see that there's a couple more status codes in here. You've got one for complete, meaning the job is done and it's ready to be invoiced, or off job. If I choose this off job status code, you'll see that icon does change one more time to a file or little folder. What this is doing is filing that job away. It's pausing that technician's time, no longer tracking that labor time, in the assumption that that technician will be coming back to the job. A good example of something like this is if a technician needed to clock out for lunch. He could go ahead and set it to off job, and then once he's back, he can go ahead and set it back to that working status code, and it'll pick right back up where he left off. You'll also see when I right click and go to my statuses, I have another one called parts pending. Now this is not a default one, this is one I've created. You'll also be able to go ahead and create your own status codes as well. Now this is really important if you do need to create, let's say, a reschedule or canceled or one of your own custom status codes. It's probably a good idea to go ahead and give us a call at least the first time for us to go ahead and help you out, because it's going to depend on what time you're trying to track based on what you need to create. Now to create these status codes, a new status code, come up here to dispatch and you're going to go to enter status codes. And you'll see this is where the default ones are listed, as well as that parts pending one I was just talking about. Now what I want to show you here, if we take a look at the complete status code and hit edit, this is what looks like when we add a new status code. We need to make sure that these particular drop downs are correct for what you need them to do and what times you would like to track. We also have another tab up here called the notification tab. When we click on that, it looks just like an email tab, and that's because it is. If we put a subject in here and fill out any of the information here, this will automatically email whatever you have written to that customer anytime that you pick that status code for that particular dispatch. So as an example, if I had set one up for the complete, I could actually send maybe a survey, or if it was the traveling, we could do a notification to let you know that we're on the way. Now these notifications, if you remember from our customer training, when we're looking at our locations tab of our customer, were those email tasks. If somebody was set to just the billing tab, they would not receive email notifications. So if a customer isn't receiving them, or if you do want a customer to receive them, make sure they're set to general, or of course all on that locations tab. Once you've created your status codes or entered in the notifications, we can just go ahead and close this out, and we'll move on to actually completing our dispatch. So from the mobile field, if you have ESC mobile application, you'll be able to complete the dispatch and invoice them out in the field. Now, of course, these are all permissions for that ESC mobile tech if you want them to be able to have that kind of access or not. In the office, if we right click on our status codes again, we can go ahead and complete this dispatch. Now when we do, you'll see that this window pops up, an invoice number field. This is for anyone not using ESC Mobile or not letting their technicians invoice out in the field. This is a way to attach an invoice number to a dispatch in case you're still doing paper invoicing or you may be invoicing out of a separate program. In this case, we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And if this was from mobile, you wouldn't even need to worry about this, and you would get the same result. When we hit OK, you'll see that my dispatch disappeared off of my board. It's no longer there. Same thing will happen when we complete the dispatch in the mobile field. Now, even though that dispatch disappeared off of our calendar board, that does not mean it's gone. We still have it in our customer center. If we were to click there and search for our customer, we know that that dispatch will show up in that right side history, and you can see it's still there for me as well. I can hit the back button and see a list of my dispatches. It's all still there. I can click on it and go directly into it. Same thing with the dispatch list that we just talked about earlier. It'll be listed here as well. There's also a history option on the dispatch board. By default, you're always going to be looking at your active, open dispatches on the board. We can come up here and switch this to history, and what this will do is show you your completed jobs or your completed dispatches from that dispatch board itself. And from here, of course, we can always double click it and go back into that dispatch, and you'll see it takes us into that schedule tab where we can go ahead and review all of those dispatch changes and times that just happened. From here, we could schedule another technician if we needed to. Let's say we completed a job but needed to go back out to that job. We could create a new dispatch, or we could even hit Add Technician and schedule another technician out to that same dispatch. The next steps from the office would be creating an invoice from this dispatch, or if you're using ESC Mobile, importing that invoice over. But that's going to be for another training. So that's going to wrap up our training for today then. Our next training will be our third training in going over invoicing. Remember, if there's any questions you may have, you can always chat in or email us at descosupport.com or give us a call at 1-800 226 7529. And of course, you're welcome to visit our support site at descohelp.zendesk.com where you can review any of the materials that we may have gone over, webinars, or any support articles. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.